Good evening, I'm Dennis Ward. Welcome to APTN National News. Tensions are high between a Mi'kmaq Nation in Prince Edward Island and the Department of Fisheries and Oceans after fisheries officers seized lobster traps on Sunday. Angel Moore reports.
Jonah Kilbride is trying to retrieve his lobster traps at the Alberton Wharf from DFO officers. Kilbride was fishing to earn a moderate livelihood.
Those have been seized for illegal fishing. It is not illegal fishing. We have the right to fish.
Kilbride said he was arrested for obstruction, and this video shows a fisheries officer reading Kilbride his rights.
They told me I was under arrest for obstruction of evidence involved in an investigation. Although there shouldn't be an investigation. They're stealing from us. If anybody should be investigated, it's them.
Fisheries officers seized 300 treaty traps on Sunday. The traps have since been replaced by the band. Chief Darlene Bernard says DFO's actions are illegal. She is demanding the traps are returned and is preparing to take the Department of Fisheries to court.
We're being harmed by DFO here. When we were going about our business like we did last year, and nothing was changing. So I don't know why they think that they can just bully us and think that they can take illegal action against this First Nation. They picked the wrong one. I'm not going to be bullied by DFO.
Bernard says she will help any fisherman who is charged.
Okay, well, we'll be defending those charges for sure. Yeah. So I am behind the fishermen 100%. They're out there under our direction, so we will certainly support them in any of those charges, and we'll defend them in court.
Lennox Island launched their own management plan without incident 4 years ago. Last year, the band issued 1,500 traps, but this year, DFO limited the number of traps to 1,000. Bernard says the treaty fishery is not subject to DFO's rules.
DFO sends a letter saying that here we're only going to authorize 1,000 traps, and again I said fine, you can write whatever document you want. It's got really nothing to do with us. We gave you our documents because this is a self-regulated treaty protected fishery. You don't get to negotiate this, you don't get to control this.
Bernard hopes to rebuild the relationship with the Department of Fisheries, but will continue to protect the community.
Well, we're always going to treaty fish now. Those 15 traps are not going anywhere. They're going to stay there. That's our symbolic little treaty protected fishery.
DFO did not respond to an interview request by deadline. Angel Moore, APTN National News, Lennox Island, Mi'kmaq Nation.
Controversial legislation in Ontario is now at the committee stage in Queen's Park. Indigenous, environmental and mining leaders appeared before the Provincial Committee on the Interior. The proposed Bill 5 would fast-track mining projects, particularly in the mineral-rich area called the Ring of Fire in Northern Ontario. Annette Francis has the latest.
Before the meeting began, NDP MP Saul Mamakwa put forth a motion that some committee meetings be moved to Thunder Bay to give northern communities an opportunity to voice their concerns on Bill 5, but it was quickly voted down.
It's lost.
Ontario's Minister of Energy and Mines, Stephen Lecce, then opened the meeting, saying how Bill 5 will benefit the economy and Ontario's workforce. Mamakwa questioned the minister of his knowledge of a northern treaty.
Treaty 9 is the only treaty with Ontario's signature on it. Can you explain in detail what Treaty 9 means to Ontario, particularly in your role as a Minister of Energy and Mines?
I'd like to ask the Minister Bickford to respond.
I would have liked to hear your perspective as a Minister of Mines and Energy.
What I've mentioned to my colleague is that we will fully respect the treaties, fully respect the Constitution, and so much so, in addition to the codification of that principle in the law that we're proposing, the proposed legislation before the House, we are strengthening it in the preamble.
Anishinaabe ASCII Grand Chief Alvin Fiddler says Bill 5 is flawed. He said it's an insult and a direct attack on their treaty.
To respectfully engage our nations especially when it comes to our territory and the richness of the resources that we have in our territory, our water, our trees, our minerals. We have the second largest carbon sink in the world in our territory. And so if you're serious about engaging us, you need to pause what you're doing right now and make space for our people to effectively engage in this process.
Grand Chief Fiddler said he's written a letter inviting Premier Ford to meet with the Anishinaabe Nation in Toronto, but received no response. He said that sends a signal the province will ignore their nations. The committee will continue its study of Bill 5 on Monday. Annette Francis, APTN National News, Toronto.
A new regional hospital in Kenora is set to move into its second phase of advanced planning, thanks to a $50 million investment by the Government of Ontario. Ojima Wabitung, Kenora Chiefs Advisory, or KCA, and Lake of the Woods District Hospital are working in partnership to create the new hospital's governance and operational model. Kenora and its surrounding area has a large First Nations population. The hospital will be built on land purchased by KCA in January. The hospital partners hope the facility will be up and running in 6 to 8 years. With more financial investment expected to come from the province, it will feature 81 beds, all private with their own bathrooms, and hopes to become a center of excellence in the province with expanded mental health and addiction services. Addressing historical shortcomings of the current hospital, it will also have a robust Indigenous patient relations department.
Indigenous patients specifically wanted to see their own people helping guide them throughout things. So patient navigation, translation services, elders who can help support them, linkages to traditional ceremonies, traditional medicines in the hospital themselves. So, we've planned for a department of 22 people to support Indigenous patients.
To Winnipeg now, where police say they are investigating a suspicious death after a body was found near an industrial park. Police have released few details, but said earlier this morning the WPS received information regarding a body found at a recycling depot near a St. Boniface industrial park. The body is believed to be that of an adult male who has yet to be identified. Winnipeg police say the investigation is just getting underway and updates will follow when more information is available. Still to come, our Truth and Politics panel will be here to weigh in on some of the happenings this week in Ottawa. Stick around. Welcome back. Plenty of developments to talk about on the federal political scene this week, including a former chief and now member of Parliament. Billy Morin has been appointed as the Conservatives' opposition critic for Indigenous Services. And the recently elected Liberal Party says it won't be presenting a new budget until the fall. Here to break it all down is our Truth in Politics panel. Jennifer Lewitz is the CEO of Pasqua Strategies, and Niigaan Sinclair is a columnist with the Winnipeg Free Press. Jennifer and Niigaan, great to have the band back together this week. Jennifer, we'll start with you and your thoughts on MP Billy Morin being named as the opposition critic for Indigenous Services.
Well, first and foremost, congratulations to former Chief Billy Morin. He was newly elected and then thrown into shadow cabinet. But I think this kind of branches off of the conversation that's been happening over the last several weeks, where we're seeing a lot of Indigenous representation in the government now, MPs, now ministers of Mark Carney's government. I think this is exciting. I think it's going to be a great learning curve for him. I think Indigenous representation, no matter where it is at that table within the federal government, is a good thing. I think we just have to remember that as First Nations people, it's a little tricky because the federal government is there to administer the services, but that's the same system that's been, historically very oppressive to our people. And now we're seeing Indigenous people that are now servants of the Crown. So it's going to be interesting. I think we need to give patience and a little bit of understanding to our fellow Indigenous people that are entering into these federal positions. And I hope he does good in it.
Niigaan, it's not unheard of for the opposition critic for Indigenous Services to be Indigenous, but of course this is the first time an Indigenous woman or person, period, is leading the department. Your thoughts on this pick?
I think it's one of those interesting moments, and it's worth noting for its historical precedence, but it's also going to lead to some interesting conversations. As we know, the relationship between the Conservatives and the Liberals has been rancorous and very accusatory. And that's, if you look, if you were to go to any sort of Indigenous gathering, and when Indigenous peoples disagree, which is probably the best thing that we do, it is not most often rancorous. It's not a lot of pointing fingers. It's done with diplomacy. It's done with a kind of in and around conversation. Sometimes people will tell you a story instead of telling that you're outright wrong. I'd be interested to watch the kind of debates that take place, even in the House of Commons, between the ways in which they're going to have to deal with some very pressing issues. The issue around CFS comes quickly to mind of the AFN. The fact that there's been emergency situations in the north in Nunavut that are pressing, that are real dealt on the issue of infrastructure, and then of course all the different issues around resource development that are going to be pressing. To see two Indigenous peoples debate over these very significant issues that are really at the table, at the front steps of First Nations people in Mark Carney's vision for the country for the next few years. I'm going to be tuning in on House of Commons on Wednesday, which is when question period takes place. Only because it's interesting. I wonder if there's going to be a different diplomacy that's going to be there, or if it's the same old. As Jen pointed out, we are talking about the Canadian government that never fails to disappoint when it comes to the treatment of First Nations people. And it certainly is mired in some very conflictual and complicated and quite colonial trends when it comes to the treatment of these issues.
Well, Jennifer, the governing Liberals have announced that there's no federal budget coming, and as of now, only an economic statement coming in the fall. What do you think that could mean for Indigenous peoples?
I'm trying to be patient because I am on, I'll play the devil's advocate a little bit in that I am understanding that it will be incredibly difficult to get a budget together when Parliament hasn't been sitting. And these ministers have just been essentially given the widespread mandate from the Prime Minister this week. So to get a budget tabled and rushed through, in my opinion, wouldn't be that great because it would be very, very rushed. But at the same time, there are a lot of nations out there that are actively, working on big issues, and they're also looking for what the status is of renewed funding in certain areas. So I know, it's going to be another summer of waiting to see if there's various funding pools that will be renewed in the federal budget, especially as it pertains to public safety and stuff like that for community development. So it is a little bit frustrating because, we are on the back burner as First Nations people, and some of the things we're seeing on nations getting done when we're not entirely sure. And even the ministers, for nations that are doing active lobbying or GR with ministers And some of those ministers aren't even going to be able to answer those questions until they know what the budget looks like.
Nigan, as mentioned, there's already uncertainty around services like Jordan's Principle, the future of child welfare, among many other things. Do you think there will be an impact on those and others with no budget forthcoming?
Well, the promise was during the election campaign that the Jordan's Principle funding, the existing funding applications that are already in would be included. The ones that are already approved would be funded. So perhaps less so when it comes to worrying really about the pressing issue of Jordan's Principle. Whether what happens a year from now, that's a completely different conversation. Okay, so let's just think about what's just happened in the past few days alone, this week. Mark Carney can have all the agenda that he wants. He can come up with ideas in housing, infrastructure, resource development, build, baby, build, which we've talked about many times in this panel. You have to reconcile or baby reconcile before you can build, baby, build. And so he's going to need Maddie Galmasti, he's going to need Rebecca Chartrand, Buckley Belanger at the table right away to deal with these issues. But then Donald Trump comes out, goes to the Middle East, accepts $1 billion plane or $100 billion plane, announces a missile Star Wars program, and then on top of that, then announces a massive bill, which I'm writing a column about it saying, never do I ever want to hear anyone talk about corruption of chiefs ever again. I think we're seeing corruption on a global scale when it comes to Donald Trump. And then Mark Carney has to respond to that. The problem is when you have an agenda, but you have a massive distractive force like Donald Trump, it means that you would then have to respond to missile jurisdiction, satellites in the sky, and now Mark Carney's attention is taken away from the issues of emergencies in the north, for example. So when you have this massive force, which then Mark Carney has to respond to, First Nations are most often left behind. That's why we need a budget. You have to have a budget to be able to solidify for ministers who are supposed to have autonomy. That's what Mark Carney promised, to be able to deliver the services necessary. The fact we're waiting to the fall is probably going to create a lot of emergency situations, which then the Liberals will have to double down on just to treat people like human beings.
Well, we're going to talk more about some of this, including child welfare, over on the Truth and Politics podcast. Thanks to you both.
Yeah, miigwech.
Thanks.
50 years worth of work by an Enoch artist is now on display. That story and more still to come. Welcome back. Time now for our photo of the day. And spring is in full effect in Vancouver, British Columbia. And Lesia Yaroshenko shared this photo. It says, despite rain and clouds, the flowers really brighten things up. You can send your photos to share@aptn.ca for the chance to be featured as our next photo of the day. Now let's take a look at tomorrow's weather forecast. Starting on the East Coast, showers and 11 in Halifax, rain and 8 in Fredericton. 5 with snow in Kuujjuaq, flurries and 4 in Nain. 12 and showers in Montreal and Val-d'Or, 15 in Chibougamau. 10 with rain in Sault Ste. Marie, rain and 12 in Ottawa. Cloudy and 12 in Thunder Bay, sun's out and 16 in Sioux Lookout. 17 for God's Lake, 19 in Norway House. 20 in Winnipeg, Gimli and Dauphin. 19 in Regina, 20 in Saskatoon and Yorkton. 21 with showers in Meadow Lake, 20 in La Ronge. In northern Alberta, showers and 22 in High Level and Fort McMurray. Rain and 19 in Edmonton, showers and 20 in Lethbridge. 16 in Vancouver, 24 in Kamloops. Rain and 16 for Prince George and Smithers. 9 in Old Crow, 13 in Whitehorse. 17 in Yellowknife, showers and 13 in Norman Wells. 0 with snow in Sax Harbor, cloudy and +1 in Paulatuck. 4 in Baker Lake, Chesterfield and Arviette. 0 with snow in Resolute, +2 and flurries in Arctic Bay. The Winnipeg Art Gallery Kamiok's newest exhibition will bring over 100 works by Inuk artist Abraham Angik Rubin under one roof. Ahead of the grand opening, APTN Sierra Bettens toured the gallery with the artist to learn about his life and work.
Here at the Winnipeg Art Gallery Kalmyur Kilak Gallery, 5 decades of work by Inuk artist Abraham Angik Rubin is on display. The 73-year-old artist is known for blending elements of Norse and Inuit mythology. Today, we get a glimpse of the stories he's carved over 50 years. We start at a marble sculpture depicting the Norse god, Odin.
The basic idea of the stone is to portray Odin, the Viking Norse god Odin, as a seeker of wisdom. He would change into different forms of birds, animals, and humans to look at the world through their eyes.
We continue to his soapstone carving titled Danish Shaman Through the Mist of Time.
And the original image was taken from a pictograph from a cave in northern Denmark of a small little hawk man, a man transforming into a hawk. When the shaman goes into a trance, it's no different if the shaman is Inuit, someone from South America, a Viking shaman. The areas where they go, the architecture is the same. The language is the same.
In the early days of the COVID-19 pandemic, Angik Rubin traded his carving knife for a paintbrush. This piece is an ode to Iceland.
I decided that a song for Iceland would be appropriate to celebrate their cultural achievements, artistic achievements, and they were able to survive against all odds.
At 8 years old, Angik Rubin was sent to a residential school for 11 years, losing his culture, language, and community ties. Here, a trio of sculptures tell stories of displacement and disconnection in the North.
You have a mother holding a young child who's screaming. He's being sent off to residential school. And she is grasping for, trying to hold on traditions. Got a hand over her husband, who's singing, he's a shaman who's singing songs.
The land has always been at the heart of Angik Rubin's work, but over the years, climate change has become a central theme.
This is at a point when the Vikings and Inuit, about 800 years ago, were in the throes of in the middle of a major climatic shift. We see here with the sculpture, it's coming to us with double the force. because now it's widespread, it's worldwide. But in my home area, we have whole areas where the permafrost is collapsing, sliding off into the sea in some areas. So that is interrupting our passage to our hunting grounds. I think we're at a point where we have to look deep into the past and gain from what our ancestors did to survive, because we're going to need it.
A reception for the exhibition takes place Friday evening at the Winnipeg Art Gallery. It opens to the public on May 24th. Sierra Bettens, APTN National News, Winnipeg.
Stunning work. Over to our Ottawa studio now, where Fraser Needham is standing by with a preview of tonight's Nation to Nation.
Coming up after the news, Ontario's Ford government continues to push ahead with plans to develop the Ring of Fire. Not all First Nations are on board, though, and Minister of Indigenous Relations Greg Rippert is here to talk to us about it. As well, the Conservatives were unsuccessful in their bid to stop the Liberals from getting a fourth term in last month's federal election. Jamie Schmale continuing in his role as critic for Crown Indigenous Relations, and he is here to talk about this and other issues. APTN reporter Karen Pugliese is also here to talk about the drive to develop critical minerals and how this is affecting Indigenous rights. All this in just a few minutes.
Thanks, Fraser. You can catch Nation to Nation in about 90 seconds from now. It's about all the time we have for your APTN National News for this Thursday. For more, you can visit our website, aptnnews.ca, and join Creason here tomorrow at 1 p.m. Eastern Time for your first look at the day's news. I'm Dennis Ward. Marcy McGuitch, thanks for being with us. Have a great night.